Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 312, and I'm joined by my co-host Jordan Tyra. How are we doing, Jordan?
Good, thank you. Glad to be back.
Fresh off the back of a birthday weekend. Happy
Yeah,
birthday, mate, for yesterday.
thank you very much. Yeah, I'm feeling it now. Feeling my age, 32 years young.
Is that it? 32?
32, yeah. And I've started playing again as well. So this could, yeah.
32, and he's
Like,
making the comeback.
I feel my age. I feel my age, honestly. I'm no spring chicken anymore.
You heard it here first. When he's making it big time, you heard it here first, back of the
Still time, yeah.
Jordan, we're joined today by Richard Ashcroft. Richard, how are we doing?
I'm good, thank you, gents. Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
No, thank you for coming on, mate. And a big thank you to our mutual friend Wayne, Mr. Richardson, for the introduction.
Yeah,
How do you know Wayne?
yes. I've come across Wayne and knew Wayne from probably 20 plus years. So through football really. And then we've crossed paths in loads of different ways and guises as we've moved through industry and life really.
It's a daft question, isn't it? How do you know Wayne Richardson? Because everyone knows Wayne Richardson. That's more to the
Yeah,
point.
that is very true.
No, thank you for coming on, mate. I'm really keen to get into some of the topics that we've got to cover today, all around development. Obviously, your experience in academy football, developing a number of players. So it'd be great to dive into that in a second. But just give us a little bit of background on yourself, mate, where you've been, the roles you've been in, and what you're doing now.
Ooh, where to start? Um, Probably start. I've always been into sport. Football was my thing. Came through the system as it was back a long time ago, the Centre of Excellence system and the old apprenticeship system, a year pro. So those times were spent at Man United and then latterly at Rotherham. Came out of the game, did a bit of non-league, uh, worked in many different industries as I've worked through, and then came back into professional probably sport in my mid 20s. Ended up at Rochdale. So I was there, went in the academy, I was coaching. Obviously evolution of the E-Triple-P, etc. Was in the middle of that. Coaching with the YDP age groups as it is now. Phase lead roles, head of coaching role, PDP role, which was both combined together a little bit, those two. So I spent a lot of my years in football there. 2019 went over to Burnley. It's 15 months before I went over to Man United. So Burnley was foundation phase lead, sort of had a coaching task in there. And then Man United have been, what was it, but till just recently, under 14s, predominantly working across the YDP age groups. So quite diverse in roles, a few different clubs. And yeah, it's been an interesting journey, to be fair.
Richard, one thing we spoke about a lot, because obviously a lot of our listeners will be sports science, S&C backgrounds, but a lot in academy football as well, or have at least had some
Yep.
experience in academy football.
Yep.
How do you feel, something we've talked about before, the skills needed for one, I know you've worked majority with academy compared to first team, but what are maybe some of the differences between academy and first team, but also between the two phases of the academy as well? Do you feel like there's big differences in the skill set for you as a practitioner?
I think if we look at it from a practitioner's point of view, but don't go away from what the individuals need, I think it starts and ends there. So then we link into the phases. So if you look at foundation phase and what they need there in terms of to give them a lot of experiences, a lot of variety, in my opinion, a lot of diversity, a lot of challenge, before it becomes more specialised further down the track. Also, it's understanding the body, understanding where they are. And a big thing that it gets a lot of traction, but probably not enough, is how we help parents and players when the growth and maturation really kicks in and starts. Some people sail through it fine. Some people we might identify as really high risk, but they sail through it fine. There's others that really struggle for a year, 2 years. So it's a huge area in terms of awareness, being able to train your eye and your different lenses you look at individuals through, how you educate and support people through that period. Then you've got your later developers in terms of growth and maturation, where it comes late, and then as you really kick through into the later ages of the YDP, PDP, then it's probably they start finding a body, they start getting the closer to the finished article in terms of a body type, and it's how you navigate all those different periods and how you build the foundations. For me, are really important as a practitioner, because it's like that is a big, massive recipe. It brings a lot of challenge. It brings a lot of skill set. It brings a lot of development areas for you as an individual to really, really hone in and then be able to change your lenses and see different things through, which sometimes people with experience can, and people with more knowledge can. So you need a blend of being able to look and understand what's happening, what's coming up, where people are, where they might need to get to. And then more importantly than not, is how you deal with individuals to help them see that through a practitioner's eyes, which is the gold dust stuff, really. Why things are important and what you can help them with through your eyes, but you're trying to make it important or explain it or help people get through it from your perspective. Sometimes we have to go back to their perspective and start from there.
That's brilliant. I can feel Jordan wanting to ask questions now. You brought growth and maturation, one of his favourite topics. So, Jordan, have you got anything on that just to start with?
I won't. I'll be here all day otherwise. But no, I think it's such an important point, isn't it? And it's great to hear, other practitioners, coaches, any walk of life bring that up, because we still see so many parents, essentially clubs, coaches who are, he's too small, he's too this, he's too that, can't move his feet very well. And then all of a sudden you do some growth and maturation assessments and find out the slap bang in the middle of the growth spurt, and that's why they can't move their feet very well. And all this sort of stuff. So it's lovely to hear. And again, just an important point that we've got to keep banging this drum a little bit. And I'm going to sound like a broken record now, but it is an important point. And I love the fact you brought that up, Richie, because I think it's like from your eyes as well. Having worked across all the phases, I think that's really a really brilliant breakdown, that even at the late stages of the YDP, the body's still settling down. People think, 13, 14, right, they've turned 14, they're done now, right, this is the finished article. And it's like, no, like we're still waiting. Some boys might be 16, 17, 18, girls might be slightly younger, might be older, depending on the individual. So I think that's really, really important that you brought that up, Richard. What, from your experience, the one, if you've been allowed to be patient with players, are they the ones that have really flourished? You must have some good examples of players that you've been patient with and you've seen them, go on and do really well.
I think it's a really interesting point to make. I think it's you can have patience, and some people just don't get to the levels you think because you're dealing with potential, which has got so many factors involved for people to realise the potential. Then you got the environment they're in. Is it the right place for them? Big factor. The program you're delivering, does that then enhance where they're going to be and come out the other end from? So are you clear on those things? Because that gives you when you're making a decision, it gives you a better informed decision, not a right decision, in my opinion, or a wrong decision. We haven't got crystal balls. It's just experience. So I think you can sometimes wait for people and give them more time, and that does allow them to. A big thing we don't talk about with growth and maturation, which I know you'll like, is confidence. So confidence sometimes can get hit, and they're not as confident. And generally, some of those people, if you can help them through those times when they are going through growth and maturation in the body, to move, to feel confident to do some certain things. So a lot of people talk about like the late developers, but sometimes the early developers are not as comfortable at making contact with other people or controlling the body, for instance, just because they're bigger. So you have all these different confidence factors that come into it across the board, but waiting for people for different reasons for what you might think will happen down the track is important. Being patient enough to do that, challenging your own environment, your own staff, your own thinking, on giving people the opportunity to develop later. Yeah, it can reap rewards. If nothing else, it'll enhance your program and enhance your thinking. In my opinion, that's the worst you're going to get. And people can develop and will develop at different rates, and some do surprise you because we don't know. Effectively, we have a good idea, but we don't really know. So some really do surprise you.
You mentioned about the parents and the importance of communication, education around that phase with parents. What's been some of your experiences with that, and maybe some of the approaches that you found work best?
I think you can bang the drum and beat the information loud and clear and talk about it. I think the more you can prepare them in terms of information before it happens, the better. But it still really becomes individualized. It still really becomes helping them. We're a little bit more relaxed in an industry because we see it regular. But when it's happening to your child and your son at a given moment, with the pressures of the cut-off points of registration moments, your dual banded years, etc., all the factors start playing out, and parents worry and children worry because they're children. So helping the children understand what they're going through, helping them understand their body, helping them relate to other people who's been through it, if you can see come out the other side as peers, helping parents understand it. I think we can do a lot generally, but it'll always come down to dealing with the individuals as best you can. I think we're getting better at that. Don't think we're as good as we can be yet as an industry, but I do think we're getting better at that. I think there's a lot of people with experience in it, but sometimes we only see it through our experience and not the experience or have empathy towards the child as much, and the parents who are going through it, which could be the first time. So if they're a child and they've got no siblings, if they're the older sibling, it might be the first time they've seen it go through. And sometimes having other children go through it and seeing them come through the other side settles you down as a parent. But if it's the first time and they're going through it and really struggling, it's like it can be tough. It can be tough, especially the ones that have niggling things that don't go away for a year, 2 years. It can be, and keep constantly being dipped in and out. It can be a tough period, that.
What do you think? You mentioned there about us getting better in terms of understanding the individual, but also there's still room for us to improve in this area. So what do you think they've been in terms of what improvements have we made? And I know that's not referring to absolutely everyone, but sort of looking at the broad scheme of things. And also, what's your advice? How do we get better about managing the individual?
I think as an industry, we're getting more transparent to some degree. So we can share with children and family what that journey might look like for them, what predominantly they're getting involved in when they come into an academy, or, for instance, in sport. Where we have got better is understanding we're making growth and maturation measurements, getting data together, but trying to make informed decisions on the context of what that data looks like by understanding and having conversations and connecting with the family and the boy. Because sometimes some children will tell you okay and they're not. Some families will tell you okay and they're not. Some children will tell you they're not okay, but the parents are telling you they are. So and we're only aware of what they're doing in the environment they come into in sport. That's with you as well. So we're not aware of the other factors that's going on around them. So already the stresses of growth, for instance, the stresses of the age groups they're at, the hormones that are kicking in, the stuff that's going on, anything else they're doing external, any of the worry that changes your metabolism. So there's a million contexts that goes into it, but I do think we're getting better as an industry identifying it. I think we're having more honest conversations about it. I think we're challenging each other as thinking from different disciplines. So whether it is sports science to coaches, coaches, sports science, etc., etc. I think we're becoming more aware of all of those factors, but ultimately it still comes down to managing and helping the individual player, child, family, club, etc. It still comes down to how you navigate all those things, and ultimately seeing them. I think a big thing is seeing the child before it, and then seeing what impact it's having, and then being able to see what they might become again further down the line. So having a people who's identified it over a full period before and watched a lot of children go through it, or it's somebody who's seen the child move quite well and do X, Y, and Z, and now they can't, doesn't mean they won't effectively further down the track. It's just we might have to help them, and we might have to be patient in loads of different ways before that comes back again. So I think the industry and where we're at is moving forward. More to do, yeah. I think being more transparent, banging the drum earlier, letting people know and shape, having people who's been through it come back in as peers and talk about it and expose people to it before it happens. So they've had a consistent message over a period of time, and hopefully it doesn't happen. It'll happen to them some way, shape, or form. But I think those kind of things would help him. The messaging would help, the consistent messaging. But then you have reference points to go back to. So, look, we spoke about this before. This person, this was that. I just think you have more reference points, more honest and open conversation with the child. So they've got to be able to have individuals they connect with to be able to identify and have open, honest conversations of where they are. Because we think they should tell us at 12 and 13 and 14-year-old, but they're trying to make sense of it themselves. They're not quite sure. Sometimes they're not quite sure what they're going through. Sometimes they think they're injured when they're not. Sometimes they've got an injury and playing through it when they shouldn't be. So you've got all these dynamics of them having to have people in the building they can have open, honest conversation with, or open, honest conversation with parents, because they can see it. So I think those things around those age groups are really, really important between 12 and probably 15 for me, because everyone's going to go through it. Everyone is going to go through it. Just the impacts are going to be different. Difference on time, difference on how it's physically feeling, different mentally as well. So, and that's the time when they're trying to grow up and see the world in a different place as well. So, yeah, it's a bit of a mad time for youngsters, and how we can help the children and the families before, during, and then after is quite important, I think.
I love that point about bringing in players that have been through it, because they can talk, because there's famous examples, isn't there, that we could probably all name of, we know the players that were early developers, late developers, but they might not be at the same club as the players that we're working with. Whereas to bring a player back from that club that you're at that time, that maybe they're in that first team or they know of in that area, I think it's quite powerful, isn't it, to them to sort of tell that story and the experience. I think it's a great point.
Yeah, it's trying to use all the resources around you, isn't it, for the benefit of the child and the parent, rather than the benefit of you or the club, for instance. The benefit to you as a coach or a practitioner or a sports scientist or the club will come further down the track if you put them first in the initial instant, in my opinion. And that's the same thing. So it's really powerful for the individual to come back and relay the messages and the stuff they've went through and relive it, so come out the other side. But then it's really important for people to see, if you go through this pathway and it happens to our son, then, or it is happening to our son, and the club are going to be patient, or we're going to help you in all these different ways, you will come through that, and it will feel all right again, and you will get consistent again, and you will get confident again. So I think that is one of the bits probably some clubs do well. Other clubs and practitioners don't probably lean on it as much. But I think we should be trying to use everything to help empower the child and the parents for then whatever journey it's going to look like.
Jordan, we're like a broken record when we talk about how we feel on the importance of like world-class developers. And I think what Richard's done there is he's given the example of why we feel so strongly about it, because the experience needed to work with players of those ages, there's a lot of challenges going into that, isn't there? So like it sort of defines why we talk about it the way we do, doesn't it?
Yeah, again, it just highlights its importance that if you've got somebody in a role who, let's say you're working with the under-14s age group, but you're working in that role because, oh yeah, this is my start, and then go into the 18, maybe the 23s and get eventually against first team. Naturally, as good as a practitioner you are, you're probably not thinking, right, 3 years, I want to make this program for these under-14s age groups, which we know are going through loads of challenges, under-13s, under-15s, whatever role it might be. We're going to really go for it and put all these implement these things in place, regardless of, you as a practitioner, if you are thinking eventually I would like to, work first thing, you are going to be looking over your shoulder a little bit and going, well, actually, there's an opportunity there. So it's never always going to be the same. It might be a bit harsh to that, but I think identifying coaches who are specifically outstanding youth developers and clubs being brave and saying, we're going to back you because we see you as an outstanding youth developer. We want to keep you with our youth players because we see the effect you have on them, I think is really important, because typically, let's be honest, in a lot of clubs, the money goes up to the top naturally, as you would expect. And so people are naturally tempted away from those youth roles. But this is where clubs can be really brave. And if you identify an outstanding member of staff or number of team members who are outstanding in those age groups, back them and say, listen, we want you working with our youth age groups all the time because you clearly have a brilliant effect on those players. I think Richard's highlighted some brilliant points there. And even, in terms of getting players back in, not even just have to be first team players, but I know from my experience at Bournemouth and stuff, when the under-9s and under-10s went to go and watch the under-23s and under-18s play on a nice show pitch with the barrier around it, they were buzzing. They were the biggest fans, youth cup nights, all this sort of stuff. So just having an under-23s player or an under-18s player who may have recently gone through sort of, physical changes, challenges with their body, challenges with emotions, whatever it might be, just to come back and speak to the youngest age groups and the parents as well. That's really important. They are key stakeholders. And say, these are challenges I face, these are challenges your son or daughter might face in the future, but this is how I dealt with them, and now I'm doing well, and I'm in this environment, whatever it might be. But Richard, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Like, in terms of, let's give you an example. Let's say you've got an under 14 going through growth, movement has been affected a little bit. What's the approach of the club and you yourself to then work with them? Do you maybe take them out and individualize work from a normal training night? Do you give them like an extra 15-minute, just to try and learn their body again, or do you just try and keep them in the squad, or is it very, person to person dependent?
Person to person dependent. But the first thing you got to do is throw enough, I call them hooks, out for them to identify and connect with his children. So if you can do that, then the conversations and initial conversation starters are sometimes easier. I think it starts and ends with conversation personally. But I think if I'm noticing that as a coach, have I got a good relationship with the individual? What's that like? Is he somebody better to approach that than me? Because we're trying to get to an outcome or an endpoint where we can work together. Having honest conversation with the child about how you're feeling, what does it feel like? I've seen a few people go through this before and it's fine, but so having honest, regular conversation with your child, for me, is really important at any stage, but more specifically when they're going through that, whether it's a lack of confidence or so. You've got that specific dynamic you've talked about. You need to be identifying that. Then you need to be flagging up and making sure, am I seeing the right thing as a coach or a practitioner or a sports scientist or an analyst coming to me going, you know what's in this? It's a win-win situation. And then how you then plot, plan, and move through will come down to working with even closer with the individual child and the parents. So ideally, do you want to take them out of the program? Probably not. At those ages, if it's beneficial in the trade-off, then yeah. For specific work, 100%. It can be 5-10 minutes in the beginning of the session, 5-10 minutes after. It can be in the middle. It's irrelevant. You can always find a time if it's the right thing. So long as you've got hands on deck to be able to do it, and the space, whatever that requires. So they're limiting factors for clubs sometimes. But you can take them out during a session. You can do half a sessions. I've experienced loads of boys sometimes where we want to keep them in a program, so it's mobility and movement, gym-based stuff for half of the session. Get the back end of the session one night, flip that the next night, managing minutes at the weekend to keep them consistently playing and involved and evolving and managing the body. So there's different ways of doing things. But ultimately, if it's me in that position, I'm noticing it. I'm having honest conversations with a boy a few times a week so we can get some honest understanding, speak to the parents, and then we look at what that looks like and what we're doing and why, and help them understand it. As a child, which is really hard. Parent, depending on their experiences before, can be hard or not if they've been through something similar before or they went through it themselves. So it's communication, it's being able to link and have empathy with the individual, and then it's how you plot that for a short, medium, long term, and just communicating that as you go through all those steps. The why, everything comes down to the why.
Talked before about confidence, Richard. I think it'd be great to dive into that on maybe some of the things that you've put in place for children that need that at certain points, but also what your advice would be, again, speaking to sports science S&C coaches, which are going to be the majority of listeners. If maybe it's been flagged up in a squad that there's certain players in that squad that are struggling with confidence, what do you think those coaches need to be aware of?
Getting connected with them, just getting to know people. It's one of the biggest things at all in anything. So are you good at noticing human behavior? Can you notice human behavior change? Can you get to know the individual and them to get to know you, which generally takes some authenticity. It generally takes you being vulnerable as an adult. It generally takes you being able to identify with the kids on their level somewhere. So what that looks like, whether it's being daft, whatever that looks like, you've got to find a way of identifying with them and then them having you and trusting you. Because for all the will in the world, if they don't understand you or trust you, and then you're trying to get them to do something that's quite alien to them, then it can be, not always, it can be an uphill struggle to some degree. So for practitioners, getting to know the kids, getting to see the children, getting to connect with them, and then understanding the child's whys becomes really important for you to then be able to go on a journey together. So I can sometimes describe it as this: we might want to both get to the same destination, but I might have to get in your car for you to drive me your way there, rather than you get in my car, who's an adult, and I'm driving you there. So sometimes the element of control and being vulnerable and trying to get to the same destination point, you might just have to do it a different way. But ultimately, it'll come down to connecting and understanding and identifying with the individual first, and that's where you can go on a journey together, which is more prominent, powerful, and sometimes quicker. And then that links into, if you want to talk about confidence, it depends. It's the same instance. Well, why? What's going on? What's going on in the life? What's underpinning some of this behaviour? Is it the lack of confidence behaviour, or is it something else? Is it just displaying as that? And then, if there is a lack of confidence, first of all, you just got to catch them doing something good. You got to keep reminding them and catching them being good. You got to be supporting and making effort towards stuff, not the outcome, the effort. So that goes back into a little bit of human behaviour, because half the time we're trying to get them to do something they're not used to doing, upskilling them, or taking them out of a comfortable environment to do stuff. So there's stuff going on around them why they're not confident, and trying to unpick that can take time. But if they trust in you and you notice them trying things and you notice them making effort towards things, the more likely to step into your car for you to drive in there as well, if you go back to that analogy. Because it can be many things. Some of the things you need to do is just get to know them. So the young boys who have confidence issues while they're going through growth, generally help them make loads of contacts, more contacts, whether you're small, big, whatever shape you are, it doesn't matter. Help them get confident in the body, help them get confident at doing a skill, a drill, help them get confident off the pace, help them give them praise in front of a group. Do you know what I mean? Buddy them up, find out about them through the sides. There's loads of different elements you can use to help people's confidence. But ultimately, it's about that's over a period. It ain't going to change instantaneous. So confidence is a delicate thing in most people in life. It's only when people come really, really assured that's something from a young age or a later age where they're quite skilled at it that you're confident. So it's an interesting one to actually identify, notice, and then have some strategies in place or try things and have empathy towards them. Try things that ultimately might get you in the same car going in the same direction with a child.
I was going to ask you about some of the biggest sort of rewarding moments that you've had with players. And I'm guessing that maybe touches in it a little bit where you've seen that change in a child that's gone from maybe a shy player, like holding back, to someone that's maybe gone on to do whatever they've gone on to do. Is there anything that sort of stands out for you in terms of the biggest rewarding moments for you as a coach?
I always go back to sometimes when you're really getting after development, it's individual development and less team development, and it's less result based and more performance based. If an individual or a child can trust you to do some of the hardest things possible to them in a game situation when the pressure's on, then that's a win because they're going after development. So when I go back to noticing and catching them, it's not the outcome. Say, for instance, somebody working on diagonal passing or left foot striking or whatever it might be, and you're noticing the child making effort towards that in game, you just got to praise that wholeheartedly, regardless of the outcome, because the satisfying thing is they're trusting the environment and trusting you to actually do this. If we overcoach and it becomes about the team or different things, which at some point it has to, and there's a balance in that. When it becomes the other way, sometimes they try less stuff and play a bit more safe, for instance. So for me, the rewards are people trusting you enough to try some of the hardest things or try some different things or different. I'm a big believer in multi-formats and different things in games, and they're trusting you for the program you're putting on and what you're doing with it to try some of the hardest stuff in game when the pressure's on. So if they're willing to do that, then all of a sudden development is happening, which means outcome further down the chain and the track going to be greater. Individual moments of people, yeah, it's what success is to them and what success is to me. Everybody's success is different. It can be people at 28 still phoning me up and they live in America and asking me for advice. It can be families trusting me enough who have been massively part of the release process, and I've done some of the legwork on it or been the main face on that, and yet I've still got great relationships with them, and I'm still going to watch their son, or they're still keeping me abreast of what's going on, or they're still phoning me for advice. And then there's people who come through and go and make it in the game, and sometimes they've adapted to something different, or been a left back and been a left wing, been a centre forward, and all of a sudden things have changed. So there's all these elements that do change that sometimes can surprise you. And there's elements and people who just sometimes the penny drops at different moments and they go on a trajectory and a journey that sometimes you don't see. Because I think as human beings and practitioners, we can always see what people can't do. I think it's the easiest thing in the world to see what they can't do yet. But why can't they do it yet? What have they had before? What have they not had? What do we do? How do we break that down? How do we help them get that? How can we get them to value that? So seeing the little things in development and people's successes and what they become is ultimately like one of the biggest successes, because the human beings who are good at sport, that's what they are, but the human beings first. So if they grow and turn into good people and develop themselves, whatever into whatever that looks like and whatever that success is for them, then they're the main things. Can't always guarantee what the outcomes are going to be, but if you're helping people be better people through the vehicle of football, and they go on some unbelievable journeys and some unbelievable experiences, good and bad, because you need both in life, then everybody wins for me.
That's the fascinating bit of academy football, John, isn't it? That if you're able to see that sort of the future of that group of players that are in front of you when you're working with them, there's going to be a range of where they're going to find themselves career-wise. But like what Richard talked about, if we focus on the human first, the progress is actually developing the person, isn't it? And then whatever comes in the future, then hopefully they're in a better position to deal with whatever it is.
I think everything Richard said there, bang on, mate. And it's important, isn't it? Because you're speaking about really important things for development, and certainly youth development. And when you were saying about working on, diagonal passes or left foot striking and stuff, I think that's really important to remember, because if you're a 13-year-old, whatever, and the match day is the main highlight of the week, and it's 1-1 last minute, and you've got a chance as a striker, let's say, you get put through on your left foot, and you've been working on left foot striking. You take that shot and you shank it wide, but you've had the confidence to actually go, I'm going to go on my left foot, rather than trying to chop back in on your right, delay it, defender gets back in and then nick it away anyway. I think a lot of coaches go, oh, what have you done? Oh, you missed it, or this, that, the other. But it is important to remember, well, they would never have had the confidence to potentially take that on their left anyway, and they better go with it. So actually praising and highlighting that is I think, a really important point, that if they're showing signs of those development, it's about the effort that they're putting in, praising the effort, and not slagging off the outcome sort of thing. So I think that's really important for coaches, and that also crosses over quite nicely into S&C and sports science as well. If you've got people who don't move very well, who are starting to show signs and glimpses of what you've been working on them with, let's say it's deceleration technique, change of direction, jumping and landing, and that they're actually showing it better, all of a sudden you can start to jump in and praise that really, really well. So yeah, that's that point. But yeah, in terms of the focusing on the human, I think it's important, like you say, that we know the stats, we know players. If you've got a squad of, let's say, 12 under 11s, the stats of all 12 of those going on and making a career out of the game are incredibly slim. But you, as the coach of those, or a staff member who has an influence over those players, the chance of you making a really positive impact on that squad is something you can control, and installing them with confidence and ways to get over challenges and things like that. So I love what you're saying there, Richard, because I think it's really important, and it highlights again the importance of academies and the importance of good environments where players feel like they can flourish. So yeah, I'm literally preaching to the choir, or whatever the phrase is, but I'm very much on board with everything you're saying. What are some of the examples you would give of let's say players who have been going through a tough time, or that they're feeling a bit down in the dumps, because we know that you mentioned it earlier, registrations come up, this, that, the other. They might all review time, they might get a poor negative review and say, oh, you've fallen behind the group or whatever. How do you go about picking them up from that? Because we know kids beat themselves up and they get right in their own head. How do you go about really getting them back on side and go, come on, let's try it, let's go for it?
I think if they've not been in the conversation, it's making sure you've identified that the conversation's happened and asking them how they feel about it, first and foremost. So like, where are they now? What's gone on before? How are they feeling? Remember, reinforcing that they are checking in on how they are human being, understanding a little bit of their behaviours and mechanisms, and what that looks like. Being able to work with them then in game training or around the sides of understanding that, this might be happening, but you've got loads of good skill sets. Here's where your strengths are. Let's have a look at these other areas where you can improve, and let's keep trying to move forward, because the outcome, don't worry too much about the outcome, even though they will. You can't. It's an elephant in the room. You can't worry too much about the end point or things further down the track. You can only affect the now and for things moving forward. Sometimes then having them conversations and them knowing sometimes releases the shackles off them a little bit. Sometimes, as we all know, human beings, some of the best performances sometimes happen for some people when the pressure's off, or when they know they're going out the building, or whatever, whichever way you want to look at that. And that's adults, never mind children. So you've got different factors going on, and you can't not. If parents don't want to let the child know, that's fine. But then you've got to have a way as a coach of identifying with the child and knowing where they're at, what's going on, some kind of conversations and connections with them, some kind of how we move forward, whether for any practitioner, not just a coach, it could be a number of sets, it could be a number of repetitions, it could be identifying things that's going to relate and cross-correlate to improvement from somewhere different, or doing more of, or doing less of, so there's loads of things that are going on that you can identify with them and help them to go after, to try and help them see it as a process, and see it as targets, or see it as motivation or lifting confidence. So there's different elements you can get after and discuss, and there's different then support mechanisms that are needed wherever those things are all happening. But it's noticing, it's catching and making the effort. It's got regular conversations and feedback, because when you get that, a lot of children will come at you. What do you think about this? What do you think I was today? What do you think I was like that? And then the ones who are really high level, skilled at some things within any kind of sport, will just be picking bits off you. They'll just be taking little bits they need, and having a play with where it fits. Not at our rate sometimes as adults, at their rate as children, or even adults. Like you can go into any professional sport, and there's differences, but some of the refinements or some of the stuff they get after or need at that time happens, and ultimately they've got to understand that you've got to help children understand that everything starts bottlenecking. So whether it's pressure points, whether it's exams, life, peers, boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever it might be, there's all bottleneck points that naturally happen through growth, through age, through timelines. So it's helping them understand that these things will keep happening, and how they can be during these times will help them for life and in life. So there's probably a lot there, but it's trying to identify the little nuggets that with each individual as you're having these, where the light bulb comes on a little bit, or where there's a little bit more motivation, or there's more communication, or there's more honesty. And then one of the big things people don't talk about, which one of my biggest subjects, is feelings. Like, how people feeling. What does that look? There's people to identify and try and describe what they're actually feeling is quite difficult. So how are they feeling with it all?
It's a great point. I think coming back to the human is so important, isn't it? And that's obviously the overriding message from what you're talking about, which I fully agree with. I thought a nice way of sort of wrapping things up would be, without talking about the obvious in terms of finances and equipment, facilities, your experiences from working at Manchester United and Burnley and Rochdale, what have been some of the key differences across working across different clubs, different categories, or is it similar just with academy football?
There's definitely differences. There's difference in terms of the individuals we're working with. Difference in terms of motivational factors, levels, experiences they've had across the different clubs, for instance, and academies. That just what people can and can't experience. That's just in academies. But then we sometimes don't look at what they've had in their life and what they've overcome in their life already, where they are, what goes on, what they've had in the family dynamics, where they've lived, what they've done, schools they've been in. So there's loads of things that are different for children and people growing up. Some of the big things are, I think you're always on time constraints, you're always on budget constraints, or no matter if it's bigger car parking constraints, there's always factors that are going to constrain you, no matter how big or small or much money you've not or got. Some some of the best cultures and actually places of work are actually where you've got to problem solve, where you've got to have more honest conversation, where you've got to get round and over and through problems. So that can be at any club, that even at the biggest clubs. So culture is really important. Having a diverse group of staff who will challenge each other in the right way is quite important. Having a consistent and joined up approach to what you're doing is important, even though there'll be differences in phase group, ages, coaches, behaviours, etc. Is really important. But some of the main differences come down to where you are on all of those. So not necessarily the biggest club will have the best culture or the lowest club will have the worst. All those things are moving parts within an organisation. So there's a lot of things that can move in terms of where you see yourself as a practitioner and all that as well. So how does it fit you? What do you learn and develop? Can you get in the room with all different people at different levels and understand challenges? Can you bring solutions? Can you challenge the right people in the right way? Can you connect with the kids? All these different things go on in all the different clubs. So it's trying to get around, when you're a practitioner, trying to get around as much people with experience or less experience who you can pick, shape, move, build a culture with, that actually build connections for further down the line as well in terms of opportunities, work, connecting, challenge each other. So I think there's a lot you can get after, and there is so much similarity, but then it'll always come down to each club is always different and unique. They're always unique from a philosophy, from a culture, from a playing style to everything. So every club is unique. Every environment is slightly unique. But as a practitioner, where do you fit in all that? Can you flex and move and operate in all that? And can you challenge yourself to be around some of the different levels of people in there, so you can absorb some knowledge, so you can be in a room and listen to conversations, so you can build some rapport, so you can challenge and respect, and you can then actually accept that the other way, so you can be challenging and respected as well. So I think there's a lot that's similar, but every club's really unique, really.
Great point. Jordan, have you got any final thoughts, questions, or anything?
I've got loads, but no, I really, really enjoyed that, Richard. I think, again, just highlighting the importance that the human being plays. I love that phrase. The human beings are really good at football. There's other ways you can put it, can't you? That they're all-round athletes and human beings, or whatever you want to call it, but it's a human being at the centre of it all. So I think the main point that came through consistently was, regardless of what they're going through, if you get to know the human being, even in a team environment, you can get the best out of that human. So yeah, I loved it. Thanks for sharing those insights, Richard. Really, really good.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Thanks for having me,
Richard.
Thanks for having me, gents. It's been good. I've enjoyed emptying my brain a little bit.
No, I think a lot of people, obviously, especially working in academy football, take a hell of a lot from that. But if they've got any sort of follow-up questions, are you on social media? Is there anywhere in particular that you recommend people to go?
Yeah, get me on LinkedIn, so you'll find me on there. I'm becoming a little bit more visible on social media nowadays because of where I'm going next in terms of trying to do some stuff myself. You can get me on Ashcroft at sky.com. I don't mind people sharing my number as well. So, like, if you've got anything direct, you want to get hold of me through you or on my mobile, you can get hold of me. So, there's different ways. Hit me on social media, especially LinkedIn. You get me on my email, and then I'm happy to share numbers. I'm happy to have a coffee. I'm happy to connect. I'm happy to if anyone's got anything they want to follow up with or question me on or challenge, I'm more than welcome it.
Perfect. No, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Cheers, gents.
Jordan, I knew that one would go down well as soon as growth and maturation was mentioned, but there were some super important points in that one, wasn't there? Like, I think for academy players, but I think when you start thinking about confidence, individualization, obviously growth and maturation goes more into academy football, but that can be widespread as well, can't it? Some of those other topics.
Yeah, that and Richard was really open and honest, and I loved it because he shared his experiences from obviously youngsters, FP all the way up to YDP and professional development as well. And when he was sharing his experience at Rochdale and stuff like that, as a PDP coach and head of coaching and things like this. So regardless of the age, confidence in your own ability, funnily enough, is quite important, and building that in the athletes. I love what you said at the end in terms of every club's the same. They are. Every club's the same and trying to develop footballers in the first team in terms of an academy. But how they go about it's different in terms of philosophies, culture, playing styles, etc. But the themes and the threads which go through every club will be trying to develop confident players, trying to develop players who are happy in their own skin, supporting players when they're not happy in their own skin, and all this sort of stuff. So, wider than the growth and maturation side of things, which I really loved that he flagged that pretty straight away. I was like, I'll move on to a winner as soon as we flagged that, me. But it's just an important one, isn't it, in terms of developing young players is about building their confidence, and then you can then carry that on and go and developing players in general is about, players who feel valued in their environment, players who feel confident in their environment, that they can try things and they're not going to get lambasted. And I get it. The point I made in terms of if you're a striker for a goal youngster and he tries it on his left foot and shanks it wide, if that's the FA Cup final with the first team, you go poor, needs to do better at least at target or place winning or whatever it might be. If that's an under 13 in a Saturday or Sunday fixture that's got nothing riding on it, it's different. It's very different. But parents sometimes, some coaches as well, they treat it like the FA Cup final. And I think it's important to remember that it's not. And if the player is developing and they're showing genuine effort to improve and take a shot on the left foot, which they've never done before, for example, then that needs to be commended because that is progress and that is development.
100%. No, I think it's really important. And I think that the stuff that he came back to, the honest conversations, the getting to know the player, like every answer came back to how well you know the player, didn't it? And having those relationships and realizing or recognizing maybe what your relationship was. I think he said, and tell me if I'm wrong, that when we spoke about confidence and players lacking in confidence, he mentioned something around, well, I'd need to see what my relationship was like with that player first before I then go and try and help them with that. And if it's not very good, I need to develop that relationship before I do anything. And it's like, well, yeah, that's a great point, because not everyone is going to be the same, the way that we treat them, because there's going to be some players that you've got really good relationships with and you feel like they might be the sort of player you can pretty much say anything to and they'd be happy with it. You could go quite harsh on criticism and they'll take it in a good way, but you take that same approach and use that cookie cutter approach and put it with someone else, it's going to go completely the other direction, isn't it? So that's the biggest thing for me that I took. Obviously, he's worked in these development environments, but the big thing was like know your players inside and out, develop those relationships. But on the back of that, he's obviously got the understanding of growth and maturation and where academy players should be pushed and pulled and all the rest of it. Like we've got to know that at those stages, haven't we? So that underlines that importance and that knowledge, whilst having that the human side of noticing. He mentioned about noticing behavior change, which is really important as well. So all these things become a little bit more applied, don't they, just through experience, but super, super important for anyone working in football, but probably more importantly, academy football.
Yeah, definitely. And it's such a really good point in that if you know your players, then you know how to handle them. Whereas if you never make the effort of knowing your players and you just think, oh, yada yada yada, a certain approach which you think might work with a couple of them, it's not gonna land with a lot of them. So if I've got 3 or 4 who I've worked with for a long, long time, I know I can be really open and honest with them, but we've got 5 who are new to the environment, don't really know me yet. They haven't really seen like my funny side or me being silly or me being vulnerable with them. And I try and come down hard, like you say, they're gonna be like, who is this guy? Like, no, I'm not listening to him, I'm going the opposite direction. So it's hard. Sometimes the environment, you're not always got the time that you could get to know everyone. But if you put the effort in, funny enough, you sometimes you get the effort back. So yeah, really, really good episode. Really good episode. Not just from a youth development point of view in academies, but also just a player development point of view. And nice from a sort of slightly more technical aspect as well, not just sports science and S&C as well, but it all ties in, as we know. So yeah, really good.
100%. No, really enjoyable. And big thank you to Wayne for the intro as well. And just on that, if former guests on the podcast or listeners, if you've got recommendations of guests, let us know, because we love having conversations with different people. We'd never met Richard before, we never spoke to Richard before, but we had a really good conversation. So that's what the podcast is all about. People from different backgrounds, different roles, different experiences coming on and talking about these things. I think it's really important. So yeah, big thank you to Wayne. And just finally, just go and check out the sponsors, Brezel, Hydro, and the Good Prep. And Jordan, thank you again for your time, mate.
No, pleasure as always, mate.